The conflict is escalating. Yesterday, we saw a major brawl between right-wing groups and left-wing groups in Portland. It was a melee with shields. Pepper spray was going nuts. Some people had paintball guns. And at one point, a man drew a revolver, and there are reports of shots being fired. Now, I've seen the photo of the man with the gun. I don't have video of it, but there are reports that the event, there was at least one shot fired. I presume that may be the case. We saw rioting as well in Chicago, in Denver, in North Carolina, brawls in Beverly Hills. Some people say that we'll only truly be in a civil war when civilians are fighting civilians, but we have seen civilians fighting civilians. But I bring this up because I don't believe the next step in this will be an all-out civil war or whatever. I know a lot of people like to say that I bring it up relatively often, but I'm sorry, I have to say this. I was not wrong so far about at least where we're going here. And let me explain. As I've said several times in the past, I'm not talking about predicting lottery numbers. I'm talking about the dominoes falling over, okay? When you look at it, when they lay those dominoes all out on the floor and someone flicks one, you know if this falls over right over there, that domino is going to fall over too. And that's all that I'm saying. What I said 2 years ago was that if the far left keeps doing this, eventually people will beg for law enforcement and you will truly start to see some draconian laws. And now we're starting to see that. In Tennessee, they passed some very serious laws against the ongoing disturbances. I don't necessarily want to say protest because they're meant to stop the insane rioting. But this is just the first step. The next step in all the clashes will not be, a large group of thousands of people charging in the streets with bayonets or whatever. It's going to be the government bolstering law enforcement because residents have enough. People are already fleeing these cities. They're fleeing their homes for a variety of reasons. Rioters have been destroying everything. And now they will start begging for law enforcement. So I think the next step is like what we're seeing in Tennessee. Now, I want to talk about the riots, but I'm ultimately going to get to this. Tennessee governor signs bill increasing punishments for certain protests. This is the next step. The law will attempt to shut down the increase in violence. And it's not going to be about Antifa. It's going to be about dueling protests and dueling brawls or whatever you want to call it. This is what Como News says. Dueling groups rally in downtown Portland. Unlawful assembly declared. I love how they titled it because I got the videos, man. And I'm sure many of you may have seen them if you're browsing Twitter. These are clashes. These are people with melee weapons and shields charging into each other, beating each other, spraying each other with pepper spray. And one guy at one point pulled out a gun. So I believe it may be the same guy who was walking around with a paintball gun. But we're going to see this, an escalation of tactics and weapons. And eventually people are going to call on law enforcement to shut down the conflict between these opposing groups. You will regret it. We will regret it. We will not enjoy. And I'm going to show you exactly what happens when you have cops just enforcing these laws to shut down the riots. And when you have regular people saying, oh, but the rioting could come back. We need law enforcement. We do. We absolutely do. But we need it a long time ago. We need cops to arrest the rioters and the district attorneys to prosecute them. And that's it. But because they're not, right-wing groups are stepping up. Many of these right-wing groups are simply going out to rally. They're being targeted by the left and attacked. And then these brawls break out, which provides the perfect excuse for the security state. Now, maybe that's the only solution. I don't know. Maybe there is no solution. But I'm telling you, I think the dominoes are going to fall over. And eventually, the last domino we'll see before a real major urban civil conflict or whatever is going to be draconian law. And we'll get to this. But first, let's talk about what happened the other day in Portland. And then I'm going to show you some quick tweets just about all of the other cities, because you got to understand this was across the country last night. They try to normalize this. And it is becoming normalized now, where it is what, 87 or so? How many days? 87? I don't even know. Since the start of the ongoing riots across this country. And they didn't stop. They have not stopped. Regular people don't know this. They're not paying attention. Here's a story from Como. They say, Portland police said federal law enforcement declared an unlawful assembly at Terry Shrunk Plaza after hundreds of people from two different groups gathered in downtown Portland Sunday afternoon. The two groups began gathering outside the Justice Center Saturday at about 12 p.m. Police said people and cars began blocking Southwest 3rd Avenue between Salmon and Madison Streets. Katu spoke with demonstrators on both sides. Some, like Valerie Lacey, showing support for police, said they're frustrated by the division. What I really wish is this group would say, yes, Black Lives Matter, That would throw them off, but everyone wants no give. I mean, Black Lives Matter. But is it worth looting and rioting and destroying businesses? No. The Portland police said, individuals and vehicles are blocking Southwest 3rd Avenue between Salmon and Madison Streets downtown. Please consider an alternative route. Police said items were thrown between the groups. There's a lot of high emotions. I don't respect the fact that there are people on the other side who are spraying bear mace. We're here to spread our message. We've been doing that for the last 3 months, demonstrator Mary Ann said. The last 3 months in Portland, they have been violently assaulting people, nearly killing people. In the riots, we've seen 30 plus dead. I certainly understand why counter groups are showing up now and saying enough, because the police are just incapable of stopping the riots. Now, of course, the police have arrested these rioters, but as I said, the district attorneys just keep releasing them. That's it. And so they'll keep on keeping on. And there are people who live here who are not on the far left who are saying enough. Police say people are intermittently engaging in physical fights, deploying pepper spray and throwing projectiles and fireworks. A man exercising at 24-hour fitness came out to find damage to his car as the group moved out of the area. Because there's no jobs right now, I do delivery services for multiple companies. And I hadn't been able to find a job. Now I can't legally drive my car because of this. That's right. And I blame the far left. I do. Because they're the ones who have been increasingly violent. But listen, the media is going to use the fact that right-wing groups engaged in a clash with shields and bats, and they're gonna say it was both sides. That's the game they play. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm saying the media is going to manipulate this, and they will always point the finger at the right, never the left. Rarely the left. Okay, sometimes they will, depending on how serious things are. But now they're going to say both sides over and over and over again, even though it's the Black Lives Matter rioters who have been going out for months. They're going to mention federal officers declared an unlawful assembly in the park and directed the crowd to the north. But I do have some images I can show you. This is from Andy No. He says another mass brawl breaks out in downtown Portland. Proud Boys and other right-wing groups rush in and fight Antifa, who are pushed back. Bats, sticks, and pepper spray are used in the brutal melee. We have this tweet from Elijah Schaefer. Portland is a war zone. Yeah. You know what I see here? In Portland, they're using shields and bats and pepper spray. Someone did have a gun, but it seems like it really is just, they're trying not to make it a war. They're trying to use the bare minimum of force, but both sides are trying to make sure they don't cross a certain line. But escalation will happen nonetheless. You see, someone drew a gun earlier. Now you're going to see left-wing groups wearing body armor, which many of them already are, and they're going to come out with their guns. And eventually, people will start shooting at each other. You have to consider the possibility. Now, I don't know if/when, but I can tell you the dominoes are falling over. And when you see when you see this going on for months, it's only a matter of time before people come out with long guns, before people come out expecting more serious damage. I mean, the left has already used Molotovs. They've been using them for months. We had a guy recently, St. Petersburg, charged with terroristic activity for having a Molotov. They're going to hit somebody with it, and they're going to maim, disfigure, or even kill somebody, and then it's that line will be crossed, and the police can't stop it. In Portland, what was actually one of the scariest things to me is that, let me see if I can find this. Kevin Cuccinelli says, quote, police do not have the resources to keep the group separate. He said, I don't know whether I agree with the statement or not, but if true, that's what state police and National Guard are for. Why doesn't Oregon Governor Brown bring them in? Why doesn't she? She's resisting Trump's help. So is Lori Lightfoot. So are all of the mayors and governors. And they don't have the resources to stop the escalation. So it will fall onto private citizens to push back against the ongoing far left extremism, which will result in an escalation. And eventually, I think both sides will start shooting. I think it's possible then that Donald Trump, I think he's on track to get reelected. And if I had to make a bet, not that I think, look, I made a lot of predictions in my day. Many of them, don't come true. I don't like making predictions. I guess I would put it more like, I think this is the next logical step. So sometimes it's not the case. I think the next logical step will be Donald Trump wins. Donald Trump invokes in the Insurrection Act and deploys federal officers. And then you see this stuff start to get shut down with harsh draconian law. But look, so I got more tweets to show you. I just want to show you this because it was all over the place. You've got Elijah Schaefer saying, Denver, Antifa rioters light a tree on fire. North Carolina, officers confront Antifa who try to de-arrest certain people. Chicago, Black Lives Matter protesters are beating a piñata and sprinkling money on an effigy of a black person. This one is just, a weird protest, which is not the biggest deal, mind you. My bigger concern is the ongoing violence and the escalation. Take a look at this. Black Lives Matter activists, Trump supporters brawl in park in Beverly Hills. Multiple videos tweeted on Saturday appear to show fights breaking out between Black Lives Matter, Antifa, and Trump supporters, according to observers. In one video, people who appear to be law enforcement can be seen standing back and not intervening to keep the peace. It's just going to keep ticking up, right? Andy No says, there will likely be a lot of violence in downtown. Antifa from all over are mobilizing for this. Police do not have the resources to keep the group separate. And this was earlier in the day yesterday, and Andy No was 100% correct. Of course, the far left is now blaming Andy No himself, saying that his hoaxes and conspiracy theories have led the far right to start attacking people, even though they've been attacking people, the far left, Black Lives Matter, for months with 30 plus dead. Andy No says Rose City Antifa is organizing violence for Saturday in downtown Portland. They are. It's actually what they do. But let's talk about where we go. Tennessee governor signs bill increasing punishments for certain protests. And this is where I believe people are going to start to regret it. You're going to start to regret it. Everybody will. This will negatively impact everybody. Everybody who loves freedom is going to be angry about this. But I'll tell you what. I think there's going to be liberty-minded individuals, liberals, and conservatives who say something like, you know what? We can take some temporary measures to shut down the extremism. But the problem with this is it's the mentality that we often hear. Okay, we only need temporary law to shut this down. It'll be draconian perhaps, but it'll be temporary. It's never temporary. It is never temporary. The law already empowers the police to shut down the far left. Why aren't they doing it? The law already empowers the government to imprison these individuals breaking the law. Why aren't they doing it? Don't ask me. But the next step is going to be people demanding more. Check out this story from The Hill. Massively viral story. Tennessee Governor Bill Lee quietly signed a bill into law ramping up punishments for certain kind of protests, including losing the right to vote. That is a lie. The far left is trying to push a lie, a technicality, technically the truth. I love it. It's the best kind of the truth. The GOP-controlled state General Assembly passed the measure last week during a 3-day special legislative session and was signed without an announcement earlier this week. Among other things, the new law stipulates that people who illegally camp on state property will face a Class E felony, punishable by up to 6 years in prison. That's it. Stop. It's a felony. They made a law that says if you camp on state property, it's a felony. Guess what the media does? People who are found guilty of a felony in Tennessee lose the right to vote. This law does not take away your right to vote because you protested. The law that says you can't vote if you're a felon has been a law for quite some time. You see what they're doing. The new law also slaps a mandatory 45-day sentence for aggravated rioting, boosting the fine for blocking highway access to emergency vehicles, and enhances the punishment for aggravated assault against a first responder to a Class C felony. You know, they already have the power to arrest these people and charge them. So why are they increasing the penalties for them instead of just arresting them and prosecuting them? This I do not like. You can have the cops arrest them and they're locked up, and misdemeanors can put them into jail for up to a year, I believe, in basically every jurisdiction. I'm not sure how the law works in Tennessee, but they can get arrested. I guess they're trying to say, if you do this, you will face multiple years in prison. Okay. Look, I got to be honest. Don't attack first responders. Don't block emergency vehicles. That's a given. But I don't like the idea that we're not enforcing the laws we have, so we need to make them draconian. The leader of the ACLU of Tennessee told the Associated Press, which was the first to report on the signing of the bill, that it would be observing enforcement of the law. We are very disappointed in Governor Lee's decision to sign this bill, which chills free speech, undermines criminal justice reform, and fails to address the very issue of racial justice and police violence raised by protesters who are being targeted. You know what? You almost got me swearing, but I despise the ACLU 100%. I used to be a big fan. I once fundraised on their behalf at a nonprofit, raising money, going to people saying, hey, the ACLU, man, they're awesome. They believe in free speech. Don't you? No, the ACLU is a racist organization. They've adopted outright racism. So I am not a fan of their pathetic, just duplicitous statement here. They don't support free speech. They say while the governor often speaks about sentencing reform, the bill contradicts those words and wastes valuable taxpayer funds to severely criminalize dissent. The bill passed the General Assembly after almost 2 months of sustained protests outside the state capitol, where demonstrators have been calling for racial justice reforms in the aftermath of the George Floyd incident. Lee and state Republicans have defended the legislation, pointing to fires that were set inside and outside the courthouse in May, though Lee has acknowledged there were portions of the bill that he would have done differently. If somebody sets a fire to a state building, you can already charge them with a felony. That's arson. So why do this now? To scare people, perhaps? I don't like it. In Portland, the state police retreated. They straight up retreated. And now we get this major brawl. And what comes next? The Draconian law. 2 years ago, that's what I said. The far left is going to do this. It's going to result in a right-wing surge. And many other people have made similar predictions. One individual, we had this tweet thread basically saying that if the far left keeps coming out, then you will see right-wing groups come out. The media will then smear the right-wing groups as fascists, as white supremacists, and all these awful things, and they're already doing it. The Proud Boys, the right-wing groups who showed up in Portland, the Patriot groups, many of them are not necessarily affiliated with anything other than they're Americans, they're conservative or libertarian. Some of them are Proud Boys for sure, and that's some type of affiliation. But already the Daily Mail is calling it an alt-right group. I'm going to tell you what you're going to get with bills like this. Take a look at what's going on in Chicago. This is a tweet from Elijah Schaffer. Unconstitutional. He says, Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot used police to block me and @FromKalen from filming on a public street while covering a controversial story about her. We were then accused of being a threat to the mayor and told to leave just for filming outside. You know who I blame for this? You know who should be arrested and charged with a crime, or at least fired. The cop right there. He's the criminal. That cop is corrupt, and I believe he should be stripped of all authority. He should be fired immediately. No questions. Fire him now. We have him on video violating the Constitution. End of story. My understanding is that these cops swore an oath to uphold the Constitution. Maybe police don't do that. I don't know. I'm not a cop, so. But I'll tell you this. The First Amendment, freedom of the press, shall not be infringed. The right to peaceably assemble, not be infringed. But the mayor of Chicago orders these people to break the law, and they do it. With a smile on their face, they'll break the law. Now, I'm not stupid enough to say all cops are bad and we must defund the police like the extremists on the left. But I'm not stupid enough to lick the boots of cops who are violating constitutional rights of journalists. It's the same thing I said during Occupy. It's the same thing I've said throughout every year I've covered on the ground protests. When you see this, you are seeing corrupt police. In New York City, you know what they would do during Occupy? The cops would walk up and go, dude, that's a frozen zone. That's what they invented, frozen zones. And they would tell me and many others, you can't stand there. And I'd say, BS. I have a right to peaceably assemble. You have no right to tell me that the street is now frozen. That's what they would do. And they'd arrest you. And you can't do anything about it. I actually filmed a guy, a photographer, who was standing on the sidewalk. This is a true story. He was trying to show the police side of the ongoing conflict between Occupy Wall Street and the cops. He was standing on the sidewalk when a female, I believe it was a female officer, arrested him and lied on the police report saying that this guy was standing in the street. He's lucky though. You know why? I was live streaming the whole thing inadvertently. I didn't know who I was filming. I was just filming. I was like, here's what's happening. They walked up to him. They arrested him. And in court, they used my footage to prove the police lied. Now, did the officer who lied under oath get any penalty? Get in trouble at all? No. Yes, corrupt cops exist. Yes, there are problems. That's why I am all about reform. Because I'm not a moron who thinks you can get rid of the police. But that's what these people are saying. Just get rid of all of them. But you know what? I tell you what, I was talking to a friend of mine, and she lives in a very nice suburb, a very nice rural area, and they've got a very bad police department, she tells me. She says they don't do anything. They don't protect anybody. All they do is go around giving bunk tickets to people. And that's why they all got to go. She's like, so many people I know get pulled over for nonsense and get these fines. They don't have the time to leave work to go and fight them in court, so they just pay them. and they're sick of it. So they want to abolish their police department. That's kind of crazy to me. It really is, especially considering they live in a blue state where it's very difficult to own a gun. And you don't have as much, you don't have the rights to self-defense like you do in certain red states. And that's when I said, you know what? Fine. All right, here's the deal. Abolish all the police, straight up. But rescind, revoke, abolish all gun laws, gun ownership laws. Everybody, Second Amendment, full swing, baby. You go out, you protect yourself. I'm not serious about this. I can understand why my friend is angry with this garbage police department. As she says, I don't have that problem. Where I live, we don't have that problem. The cops in my area are really cool, and they've helped me out a couple times. I've talked to them, at various instances where I had to go in for just like general paperwork stuff, like getting my firearms ID and getting it filled out, and sometimes bureaucratic, but no big deal. But this made me angry. This video from Elijah Schaffer of this cop being like, "Duh, you can't stand here," even though it's illegal for him to do this. What's it going to do? The problem is Elijah would have to say no, get arrested, and then file a lawsuit against him. Most people aren't willing to go through this. Most people want to avoid the conflict and confrontation. Here's what I'm trying to get to. We need police, 100%. I think we can reform police in a certain way. And that typically refers to adding more funding for new training and having potentially, like, they talk about social workers and stuff like that. But New York City has community police, maybe something like that, where they don't do the same job. They respond to certain things. You have 311. These things have been implemented. We need more funding for better training. We need police officers to uphold their oath to the Constitution. And we also need to guarantee that if a cop like this breaks the law, he gets fired. Now, I know. A lot of people are going to say, Tim, you don't understand because that cop doesn't necessarily know who you are, what you're doing, and he needs to protect the mayor's house from perceived, say death threats or something. And that's why he's there. Sure. Constitution supersedes that. I'm sorry. Freedom above security. That's it. I have a right to film, to go on the street more than she has a right to be secure. My rights, my freedoms, my constitutional rights to the press and free speech and assembly are above her rights to feel secure. We must err on the side of freedom. This right here is how we devolve into saying it's better to have security. No. And that cop is responsible for it. I'm not going to play these games where I'm sick and tired of watching people lick the boots of cops. Now, the left will say you're a bootlicker because you're supporting the police shutting down the riots. No. A bootlicker is not someone who says, thank you, police officer, for enforcing law and shutting down these criminals. A bootlicker is somebody who says, thank you, officer, for taking my weapon away from me, disarming me while rioters are coming to my house. If these riots are not stopped by these leftists, you will get draconian laws like we're seeing in Tennessee. And then you will get cops who are going to be like, I don't know, man, it's just a law. So, shut your mouth and come out of your house. We're sending you to the gulags. That's how it starts. I don't know if we'll actually get to that point. I actually think we may end up just seeing, they shut down the riots. But what you got to understand about all these laws is they will be unevenly enforced, like we're seeing in Chicago. Why is it? And I believe Elijah Schaffer may have mentioned this. Why is it that all of the places where there was looting and rioting, there's no cops there saying you can't assemble here, but the mayor's house? They will use these laws to protect themselves, and we must be careful about this. Freedom is the most important thing, but we need to respect law enforcement when they're actually trying to do their jobs, like actually stop criminals, not violate the Constitution. What Lori Lightfoot is doing is extremely illegal. It is, straight up. Bill de Blasio is doing the same. They're all doing it. And the cops just gleefully say, I don't know, man, just whatever the boss tells me, so I'm going to go and arrest somebody for who didn't break the law. You're not going to enjoy it if this continues. And someone's got to stop. Look, these cops have been going around enforcing unconstitutional edict during the COVID lockdown. And conservatives have been freaking out about it. I find it surprising. I'm not going to support these people. I'm about freedom. I'll leave it there. Okay. The riots are getting worse. That's my 2 cents. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.